to Connection. Pastor D.E., my brother, cannot be with us today, but we are going to begin with our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we thank you for this new day in which we are filled with gratitude. We are grateful for another day to live out our lives in freedom, in happiness, and in joy. We give thanks to you for both the tangible and intangible daily bread that you provide for us. We live and move and have our being in the perfect, unconditional love that lives in our heart. We are grateful now for that which we have already received and are grateful in advance for more than we can ask or think coming into our lives on a daily basis. We commit ourselves today and every day this year to get happy, stay happy, and be happy and see what happens. In the name and nature of the Christ, amen, and so it is. Okay, we're going to begin I just said we're going to begin with the morning blessing. So now we will begin the second portion with our quotes, as we always do. The first one is, "It's still magic, even if you know how it's done." Terry Pratchett. Next, from Elizabeth Gilbert, "The universe buries strange jewels deep within us all and then stands back to see if we can find them." Next, "Words and magic were in the beginning one and the same. Even today, words retain much of their magical power." Sigmund Freud said that. Next, "Balance is not something you find, it's something you create." Jana Kingsford. Now, that's a popular idea and construct within which you can interchange a lot of words. I've heard that a lot of ways, that peace, joy, love, happiness isn't something you find, it's something you create. And it's true of all of those things. This quote specifically, though, is saying that balance is not something you find, it's something you create. Next, "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Albert Einstein. Next, from Carol Mosley Braun, "Magic lies in challenging what seems impossible." And lastly, from Danielle Orner, "Life is a balance between what we can control and what we cannot. I am learning to live between effort and surrender." So that's the perfect quote for today's teaching, which I'm calling Practical Magic, which was also the title of a very popular late 90s movie. And as the quotes indicate, it's going to be about the balance between magic and practicality. Many times in both the New Thought community as well as in Christian and other religious circles, there's a tendency sometimes to think that you can have whatever you want if you just believe hard enough. In Christianity, that extreme manifest in the name it and claim it theology, or word of faith. And they base it on lots of scriptures, most of which have been taken out of context. In New Thought philosophy, it's when people misunderstand concepts such as the law of attraction and think that if you just put a picture of something that you want on a vision board and then think only positive thoughts about it, that it can't help but come to you. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Did you enjoy that? The other extreme, in Christianity at least, is that it's all about your good deeds and how well you follow the rules. It's a huge dichotomy that most churches present, wherein they tell you that salvation is a free gift purchased for you by the blood of Jesus on the cross to save you from your sins. But after you accept this free gift, there's a whole lot of work involved. And again, many, many rules that must be followed in order to maintain this status of being saved. It's the doctrine of grace mixed up with the doctrine of good deeds and works. And as usual, the truth is somewhere in the middle. One of the easiest ways to explain this would be with the scripture, "Faith without works is dead." Now, the reverse of that is also true. It's also true that without faith, your works are really meaningless, or they do not live up to the full potential that they could if they were coupled with faith. We've talked about many times before the fact that truth is most often held in the tension between opposites, which means, for our purposes today, just because some things can and do come to you with ease, that doesn't necessarily mean that your life is going to be easy all the time. So let's get started. I'm going to read a short passage from a book that we did a Wednesday night series teaching on years ago called Radical Forgiveness, to give you a more clear example of what I'm talking about when I say that truth is held in the tension between opposites. Spiritually mature people must be able to hold two opposing truths in their consciousness at the same time. So here's what it says in the book Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. It says, since all theories are based upon certain assumptions, it is important to have an understanding of the spiritual assumptions underlying the theory and practice of radical forgiveness. Before looking at these, though, it's worth noting that even the most widely accepted scientific theories are often based on assumptions for which there is very little hard evidence. We can say the same thing about the basic assumptions handed down throughout the ages about God, human nature, and the spiritual realm. While there is little hard scientific evidence to support their validity, such assumptions have been handed down to us as universal truths or principles for centuries and have formed the foundation for many great spiritual traditions throughout the world. They certainly are foundational to radical forgiveness. Some of these assumptions are now being proven by physicists to be scientifically well-founded. I prefer to use the word assumption rather than belief or even principle, because simply classifying an idea as an assumption allows for the possibility of a greater truth emerging in the future. I love that he said that. I am more likely to be open to seeing the deeper meaning of something if I am not ego invested in a belief system I feel obliged to defend. I prefer to hang out in the question rather than take a fixed position on something that has yet to be proven. Radical forgiveness makes very little sense to the rational mind, at least to that part of the mentality that is grounded in everyday reality, as perceived through the five senses. That's because radical forgiveness operates according to spiritual law, not physical law. It is essentially a metaphysical idea. Nevertheless, in order to wrap our minds around the basic idea as best we can, it helps to go over some of the assumptions that give some structure to the concept and a quasi-rational basis for understanding the technology. Each assumption listed is expanded upon at length later on in the teaching. So then it lists these opposing truths that need to be held in tension in order to understand the concept that the author of the book is calling radical forgiveness. So here they are. He says, we have bodies that die, but we have immortal souls that existed prior to our incarnation and that continue to exist after death. Therefore, death is an illusion. So, the ideas he's presenting here, the two truths that are having to be held in tension are, at the same time, we are both mortal and immortal. Next, while our bodies and our senses tell us we are separate individuals, we are all one. We all individually vibrate as part of a single whole. Okay, so that's two more. We are individuals, we are separate in our different bodies, but we are also all connected and are one. Next, in order to exponentially expand our awareness of oneness, we agreed to come to this world of duality in order to experience the exact opposite of oneness, separation. So there's another one. In order to learn more about oneness, we had to come experience the opposite of oneness, which is separation. Next, part of the agreement was that we would forget the world of oneness we came from in order to fully experience the pain of separation. When we have experienced the amount of pain we agreed to have in this lifetime, we use radical forgiveness to awaken and remember who we are. Since the pain of separation is an emotional experience, we need a body to be able to feel it. The human experience is meant to be an emotional one, so the extent to which we deny our feelings is the extent to which we deny our purpose for being here. We are spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in human bodies. Vibrationally, we live in two worlds simultaneously: the world of divine truth or spirit and the world of humanity. Once we awaken, we can comfortably live in both. So see, that's what I was saying. Spiritually mature people are able to hold two opposing truths in consciousness at the same time. The world of humanity is a spiritual classroom, and life is the curriculum. Our lessons are the events that happen in life. The objective is to awaken to the truth of who we are and return home. When we decided to incarnate into the world of humanity, God gave us total free will to live the experiment in any way we choose and to find for ourselves the way back home. Now, back home, in this case, in my opinion, is not talking about when we die and go to heaven. It means finding our home, which is where we came from, heaven, that realm, right here on earth as a level of consciousness. So I want to give you another example now, this time from my own teachings about how you can and must be able to find a middle way between practicality and magic. I did a teaching back in 2018 called All My Lessons Come to Me Gently, and I'm going to read to you a part of that introduction now. I said at the time, about a year ago, a family member of mine and I witnessed together the unfolding of a tragic situation in another family. And as we were there, this family member said to me, "Man, I hope our family never has to go through anything like this." To which I replied, much more confidently than I normally would have in a situation like that, "We won't. I have an agreement with God that all my lessons will come to me gently." And I was a little surprised because at the time, and even now, I'm not really sure where that response came from. It was certainly from somewhere beyond me, and it's not something I had been thinking about especially, but it came out of my mouth very clearly, and as I said, very confidently in that moment, and it has actually become a little bit of a life philosophy for me. Since that time, I have had the chance to think about it and meditate on it, and I think the meaning of it is this. Obviously not 100% of the time, but I'll say a good deal of the time, the seemingly tragic things that happen don't just come out of nowhere. Many times when something catastrophic occurs, you can usually look back in retrospect and see the warning signs and realize that you should have, or at the very least could have, seen it coming. Not always. And not that you're responsible for it or that you caused it, but that it could have been predicted. And when it involves someone other than you, someone you love and are close to, sometimes even if you see it coming and know what will very likely happen if their course doesn't change, there's often very little you can do about it because you can't control their actions. But when it's your own life, you can. And I think that too many times we have these big earth-shattering moments simply because we refused to listen and pay attention to the still small voice that was nudging us to go in a different direction or to stop a certain activity or to change something about the way we were handling a situation way back down the line before we passed the point of no return. No one wakes up in the morning and decides on the spur of the moment that they're going to go shoot up a school or a concert or a church. A long time before that, the seeds of hate and anger and bitterness were allowed to take root and have now grown into rage. And so over the course of this past year, I've really been giving it some thought. Is it possible that I could go through the rest of my life with all of my lessons coming to me in a gentle way rather than at some point having to deal with a sudden tragic situation? I don't know. But I do know that as much as lies within my power, within the realm of what I can control, which is me, I'm going to make a conscious effort to find and then to follow whatever that still small voice of spirit tells me, so that I won't get caught off guard, as it were, by anything I have the ability to prevent. And I also really believe that part in the Bible that says, ask and it will be given to you. A lot of people use that in the context of things, of getting material possessions, but it can also be used in the context of knowledge, of guidance. So think about it. Who would turn their son or daughter away, or a friend, or really anyone who came to you honestly asking for your guidance? If your child came to you and said, is there anything you think I should know today, Mom? Is there anything you think I should be aware of, Dad? Can you see something I don't see right now that will help me in the future? Just tell me. Who would refuse a child or a friend that guidance if you were in the power to give it? No one. I wouldn't. Now, it's a little bit different story if they don't ask, especially if they've already become an adult. Then sometimes, as a good parent or a good friend, you just have to keep your mouth shut. But if they ask, you're most certainly going to give them the best guidance you can, because you love them. So why would God be any different? I think sometimes we don't see these things coming simply because we don't ask. The Bible also says, you have not because you ask not. But if you take the time on a regular basis to just check in and say, hey, God, is there anything in my life that I should be doing differently? Is there anything in my heart that's no longer serving me, that I've held on to for too long and need to get rid of? Is there anything at all I could be doing a better job with? And I promise you, if you go to God in that attitude, you will get an answer. You may have to get still enough and quiet enough to hear the still small voice, but it is always there. And if you do that regularly, there's much less of a chance that the universe will have to hit you upside the head with some big catastrophic life lesson. Because I have found from simple observation that those usually happen as a last resort, when all other attempts to get the message across have been ignored. Okay, so in that teaching, I was making the case that yes, all your lessons coming to you gently is possible, but only if you learn to consciously listen to that still small voice inside that's attempting to guide you gently. If you ignore the still small voice and all the little nudges that your intuition is sending your way, then gentle lessons are off the table. So the title, in and of itself, All My Lessons Come to Me Gently, in retrospect, could have been a little misleading. A better title might have been, All My Lessons Can Come to Me Gently, but that doesn't seem to have the same ring to it. Okay, so now to a piece by Andrew Martin, who is talking about two different perceptions of struggle. I also did a teaching a while back called The Struggle is Real, but is it? And in that teaching, I was talking about how sometimes we struggle unnecessarily because we are addicted to drama. And while that's true, what Andrew is saying here about struggle is also true. And bonus, he also addresses another truth that's held in tension between two opposites about knowing when to stand still in your truth and allow things to come to you, and knowing that at other times it's necessary to move toward what you want. Okay, so he says, true liberation is finding a way to say thank you for all of it and knowing that everything serves you. There is value in every experience. Saying I am grateful for everything that has shown up in my life is acceptance of what is, but at the same time, we can be eager for more and ready to receive it. In order to get to the more, you have to move. You have to take a step forward. Okay, so then he talks about numbers, and he says there's a difference between the numbers 4 and 5. 4 is it's an even number. It's a stable, solid number, both feet on the ground, weight evenly distributed. But the second you lift your foot and take a step, the balance is momentarily gone. And that's what 5 represents, or any odd number, okay? So that's when you're most likely to fall or to be knocked over, because number 5 signals instability. But if you never pick up your foot, you'll never move forward. True liberation is being equally grateful in times of balance, the 4s, the even numbers, and in times of imbalance, okay, the odd numbers. All experiences have value, and all experiences serve you. So there's a quote that I've given you before that says, always run toward your dreams rather than away from your fears. And so while that's a good principle, okay, yes, sometimes movement in your life is a result of a little bit of both of these things. Sometimes it takes fear to make you uncomfortable enough to move, because when you're in that 4 energy of stability, you're comfortable. You don't want to move. So sometimes you have to become a little bit uncomfortable in order to give you that push you need to get moving forward. So it's not an either or. It's not only run toward your dreams and never move out of fear or discomfort of where you are. It's a both and. Yes, it is better to run toward what you want rather than away from what you don't want. But sometimes it takes living in that contrast for a bit of what you don't want to give you that push you need, as I said, to run toward something different. Andrew continues, the fullness of your presence is required wherever you are. And if you find yourself in a place that you don't really like and you're not really digging the circumstances, go deeper into yourself. Surrender more fully to it and ask Spirit. What did I say before? The Bible, sometimes we have not because we ask not. Ask Spirit to help you see the value of whatever it is you are experiencing. We talked about this a little bit last Wednesday night in our teaching of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. He was saying that it's best, it's ideal to always be able to accept the present moment as it is, no matter what. But if you find an event unacceptable, if you just cannot accept whatever it is that's in your external reality, then the only way you can surrender is to accept your internal reality, which would be acceptance of whatever pain the external event is causing you, and go deeper into that. Specifically, he said this: if you cannot accept what is outside, then accept what is inside. This means do not resist the pain. Allow it to be there. Surrender to the grief, despair, fear, loneliness, or whatever form the suffering takes. Witness it without labeling it mentally. Embrace it. Then see how the miracle of surrender transmutes deep suffering into deep peace. This is your crucifixion. Let it also become your resurrection and ascension. So what he was saying there is there's always a way to find value in your experience, okay? Always. Whether it's surrendering to what's external or internal, there's always a way to find value. Back to Andrew. He says, the feeling of imbalance isn't always wrong. Sometimes we need the challenge. Sometimes we need the struggle. Now, that's not very popular talk. But he goes on to say, when a caterpillar has gone into its cocoon and has finished its transformation, which has all been an inner journey, okay, it then has to emerge into its new outer experience as a butterfly. And that necessitates a little bit of struggle to get out of the cocoon. So basically, the analogy here is, okay, so you're doing all this inner work. Fine, that's great. But it's not, what good is it if you don't then use it in your external experience? But it's the struggle that strengthens its wings. Once you've done some inner work and reached a new level, new wings need the push and pull of struggle in order to become stronger. Sometimes what we see as an obstacle or a challenge that requires struggle is not a hurdle, but rather a stepping stone for something, to reach for something higher. Beautiful. So there's that tension again. Sometimes struggle is good and useful. He says here that don't look at it always as a hurdle, but as a stepping stone up to reach for something higher. I want to talk a little bit more now about the concept of magic and how it really works. And here's a hint. It takes more than just saying abracadabra. A lot of times when the word magic is even mentioned, people get very scared. They don't want to mess with it. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to think about it because of the conditioned beliefs we have around it. But it's not scary. In fact, I said in one of my teachings that the word spelling that we use for spelling, that's exactly what it sounds like. When we speak words, when we spell words, we are casting spells. We are speaking into existence what is in our imagination. So magic is not this big, scary topic. I might get into that later on. But the piece I want to read now is an excerpt from Esther Hicks, who is speaking with a guest at one of her conferences, and it's called Tune In to Your Magic. The guest says, "We are perceivers, and we perceive everything from our perspective. We are consciousness creating the illusion we're experiencing." Now, time out here. When he made that statement, a red flag popped up in me because he used the word illusion, that he was creating an illusion rather than reality. Instead of saying that we're creating our own reality, which is a big teaching not only of Esther Hicks, but many other spiritual teachers, he said we are creating the illusion we are experiencing. And I immediately thought, uh-oh, he is about to get corrected, because Esther Hicks will not hesitate to jump in and interrupt and correct you. And he did get corrected, but not in the way I thought. So he finished his thought by saying, so since we are creating the illusion we're experiencing, we can choose anything we want. Okay, which is true. We are free to choose to perceive in reality. We are free to choose to perceive our reality in any way we want. But if it doesn't match the general reality, then we're going to be living in our own little world all by ourselves. And I'm sure some people might prefer that. But when you do that, when you live in your own little world because you've chosen to perceive something that is so far away from the general reality that nobody else can see it, then you have forfeited your ability to connect with others in any meaningful way. So he's just stated that since we create the illusion we're experiencing, we can choose any perspective we want. And Esther then chimes in with these two words. She says, within reason. And I thought, yep, I knew she was going to stop him right there in his tracks. And I could replace those two words she used, within reason, with saying practical magic. It's the same concept. Yes, magic exists, but because we live in the world we do, there are some practical aspects you must walk out within it. So then she then continued to explain it like this. She said, you can't get very far away from your vibrational altitude. Your perception is something that is vibrationally based. And the more in vibrational alignment you are with the greater part of you, or your higher self, then the broader and more expansive your perception is. So in essence, what she's saying here is you can't just decide to look at your life or life in general and perceive it any way you choose just because that's the way you want to perceive it or because that's the way that you would prefer it to be and expect for that perception to just become reality without coming underneath that perception with a foundation of doing some work. And the work in this case is making sure you are in as perfect alignment with your higher self as you can be. That is the solid foundation for being able to choose how you're going to perceive life, your alignment with Source, your own Christ consciousness. Otherwise, it's just delusional thinking, and you might end up in an institution somewhere being medicated. So, only when you have done the work of getting yourself aligned can you perceive something that is not in your reality and have it come into your reality. I hope everybody's getting that concept. So then she goes on into an explanation about the difference between what she refers to as the next logical step and the next magical step. And here's where my title today comes in. practical magic. Everybody wants a magical life. Who wouldn't? But in order to have it, there are some practical steps. It's not either or, as I said already. It is both and. She gives a very good explanation of that here when she says, by the next logical step, I mean the one you can believe. Because if it's not believable or logical to you, then it's not possible for you. Sometimes we use the terms magical and logical as opposite, but that's really just semantics. When we use the word magical, we often use it to imply that there's something outside of you, that there are forces at work that you haven't harnessed. And what I want you to understand is that it is your harnessing of the energy that creates worlds, which is just another way to describe source energy or energy that comes from source, that creates what others refer to as magic, but what you see as your logical next step. There's got to be an acceptance of your own power and the logic of that in order for you to magnificently create your reality. Now, she didn't say, but what I will add is not an illusion like the guy was talking about, but your actual reality. She goes on, it's sort of like dogs being able to hear sounds humans cannot. It's only because dogs can hear higher frequencies than us. Dogs are not magic. They just have an ability we don't. To the dog, hearing what it hears is normal and logical. A better definition of magic, then, is when everything appears to be working in concert with our desires, when timing always seems to be just right, and the right doors open for us with ease. This might look, from an outsider's perspective, like magic, but it's actually the result and consequence of us doing the work it takes to align with our higher self. Plan A has a certainty to it, but it's okay to have a plan B too. That's not doubt, that's just a support for and a shoring up of plan A. There is not just one avenue only through which our well-being flows. It comes to us from every direction. So what I believe she's saying here is what I've been trying to say this whole time, that it's the perfect combination of faith and works, of standing still in your acceptance of the now moment and allowing things, and also struggling to make a move forward to something better. It's that perfect combination between magic and the practical, logical steps we take that ultimately gets us where we want to be. Truth is held in the tension of these opposites, always. I want to end today with some of those practical steps that we can take to create for ourselves a more magical life. And they're from an article called Doing the Best You Can by Manuel Gozaine. He says, do you want to feel more at peace in your life right at this moment? If the answer is yes, then do this one thing. Regardless of what it is you're doing or experiencing, do the best you can. That's it. Doing the best you can is very simple. When you're contemplating or starting something, intend on doing the best you can. Say to yourself, both outwardly and inwardly, I'll do the best I can. How you start or begin is important. Be true to yourself. Personal integrity is important. Don't only say outwardly for the benefit of others, I'll do my best, knowing you don't really mean it. What would happen if you actually did mean it and then followed through? How different would the outcome be? Doing your best will transform the way you do the simplest of tasks. Think of these benefits. Number one, awakening to this moment. When you do your best, you'll experience life on a whole new level. You'll be fully immersed in what you're doing. You will have sharp but soft focus on one action without the need to think about what was before or what's coming after. So it increases your ability to focus. Number two, acceptance and appreciation. The underlying intention of doing your best will pave the way for you to experience this moment as it is. If you're feeling angry, it's the best you can feel at this moment. If you're feeling happy, it's your best as well. Accepting what you're feeling will ease you into action with more awareness. If you know you're doing your best, not just saying it, you can't expect anything more from yourself. You will accept your effort for what it is. And when you accept, you open your entire being to life. You set yourself up in a feel-good loop. You accept and appreciate, and you feel better. And as you feel better, you appreciate and accept more. Number 3, being at peace. When you experience what's unfolding right now without struggle, you will feel an inner calm. You will go with it and let everything else float in the background. How do you do your best? How can you tell if you're doing your best? It's very simple. Look within and see how you're feeling at the moment. Are you content? Are you calm? Or are you anxious and frazzled? Only you can tell. Consider these simple guidelines. And these are the practical steps I was talking about. Number 1, no standards. You get to define what best means to you. There are no grades or gold stars, which some people may find disappointing. But if you're only doing your best in order to earn a good grade or to get a gold star, then that's a very low level of vibration. That is an immature foundation from which to live your life. When you define what your best is, you own it. So, number 1, no standards. Number 2, no perfection. Your best is personal, not perfect. It's dynamic and flexible. It will change and grow with you over time. Number 3, no expectations. Put in your best effort without any regard to outcomes. Don't focus on goals and targets. Do the best you can, and the results will take care of themselves. Next, no rush. You can't do your best if you're obsessing over how fast you're going and trying to save time. Go for it and forget time altogether. Next, more play. Don't take things too seriously. The best is usually lighthearted and playful. So you know how they talk about athletes when they get in the zone, they have to keep their muscles loose because if their muscles tighten up on them, they can't perform to their best. This is what I think he's talking about here. You have to keep yourself a little bit loose in order to do your best. Also, there's advice when you're shooting a gun. They say, don't hold it so tight. You just gently squeeze it. So that's always good things to remember. The lighter you carry things, the better your best will be. Lastly, it has to be a way of life. As we've talked about before, quick, rapid, radical changes usually don't last. You must adopt doing your best as a whole new way of life. Doing your best can and must become a way of life for you every minute and every day, whether it's a mental challenge, a physical experience, or an emotional meltdown. Reminding yourself that you're doing the best you can and truly doing the best you can is the best way to handle anything. When you wake up in the morning, remind yourself that your intention today is to do the best you can. Do your best when you move out of bed. Make your breakfast the best one you've ever had. Get dressed like it's fashion week for you. Do the best job you can while you're at work. Smile your best smile. Laugh your best laugh. And cry your best cry. It is the smallest of moments experienced to the fullest that infuse your life with the most profound meaning and value. A life lived moment to moment, the best way possible at the moment, is a life well lived. And I would just add, that is how you get the magic in your life. So thank you so much for joining me today. And please remember to also tune in with us tomorrow night. We will continue with Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now with my brother, and we will also see you on Sunday. I love you. Bye-bye.